Good morning. It's September 3rd, 2022. My name is Barbara With, and you are here with me and the Psychic Sorority and the Party of 12, a delightful group of souls working from the afterlife for world peace, headed up by none other than Albert Einstein. And today we are taking a deep dive into the darkness. And we've got some surprise guests, not only in Afterlife, but on Zoom as well. So welcome to the party. All right, and I'm Barbara, and I'm here on Madeline Island in Lake Superior, surrounded by crystal clear water, no salt, no sharks. Today, I think it's rather ironic, but not, that as I was preparing to present something, I got a very clear nudge from a guest from Afterlife, which is not often something that happens, where somebody from the party taps me on the shoulder and says, let's talk about this. But so I was all set to say, there's a surprise guest. and we've got a couple surprise guests here, so it's all fitting. The surprise guest showed up just this morning, something in my email box. I clicked on it, and it led me to this whole 10-minute piece about Carl Jung. As I read it, I thought, okay, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. And I dug a little deeper. And I had been also this week thinking about the shadow side and darkness. And Heike and I had a really great conversation that I hope she shares a little bit of later about going into the darkness. But so when this Carl Jung thing came up, and I realized, oh, he had this whole thing about shadow. And because I've never researched it, I've never read Jung, I've never read Freud, I've never gone to college, all I wanted to be was a rock star. So doing this research this morning is just another affirmation of the direction and the depth and the miracle of what we're doing here today. So I went to dig a little bit, and I got Freud and Jung coming up, and realized that, first of all, why was Freud in Party of 12 and not Jung? Because a lot of the influence of Jung is apparently in our work with Einstein, which would make sense because Jung also attended to Albert's distressed son in real life and when they were in physical life. So Jung calls the shadow a blind spot of the psyche, which I think is really interesting. And when I went to the page, here were both of Jung and Freud's perspectives sort of being side by sided, and why they were different. The shadow is something equivalent. Jung's shadow side is something equivalent to Freud's unconscious. So then I had to go look at what was Freud's real. I know he had a structure, and there was an id, and there was a this, and then there was that. But according to this research from his work, unconscious meant mental processes of which individuals make themselves unaware. Mental processes of which individuals make themselves unaware. So to me, that was the subatomic part of our maps. And I'm going to I want to just screen share this image here, because this came from Einstein et al. When we broke out this is the flow of your gravitational wave coming up from the center of the Earth, headed into the lens to create you. And so we broke it down into these different 3 human dimensions, even more intricately. So you see at the bottom is emotion. That's just the I am of who we are. And as it moves up into the second, into the intuition, sound is born. So now you hear the impelling of your emotion and that piece that is compassion to do the best for the good of the whole. And then it flows into intellect. And this is where they've always said that it gets very complex because you have this subatomic range of intellect, which is sort of the I am a chair, I am a chair, I am a chair, because you have everything inside you in your universe. And at that point, it's still I. And then I'm Barbara with, but those things are pulling apart. And then it goes into the human range of hearing. And of course, there's all of that cacophony, but there's also the definitions of who we are. And that's when it flips, it revolves. So I am a chair becomes that is a chair, getting ready to produce that chair in the lens, physical stuff. And then it moves into the third superconscious, where all the thinking for the good of the whole really resides, the superconscious. And then that flows through free will. And there's the lens and creating our universe. So when Freud said the unconscious, I figured that was the subatomic, but then the conscious he calls ego. And that's what I figured was the human range of hearing. The id, oddly, is instinct. And we talked about instinct in the past couple of weeks, about it sort of being this thing between emotion and intuition that animals have. So I put that id down there into the emotion, intuition part, because see how simple those parts are compared to what the intellect is. And then the superego, he says, equals the conscience, not conscious, but conscience. And so I figured that was the superconscious. And what Jung says is that the shadow is actually everything outside the light of consciousness, and maybe positive or negative. Everything outside the light of consciousness. So that to me is the dark matter. That to me is the non-physical that we've been working with forever. And Jung says, everyone carries a shadow, and the less embodied in the individual conscious life, the blacker and denser it gets. So that would be our abscess, the abscess of when we don't allow ourselves to feel. And Jung oddly also said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And what I think was also interesting in my studies was that Jung actually spent some time in Taos, New Mexico. And he hung out with the Pueblo Indians. And that struck me doubly, that he was in Taos, land of the quantum leap, where Einstein channeled his first worldwide transmission on September 19th, as predicted in August of 1994. And also that he was enthralled with the indigenous cultures. And what he came away with, there's so many stories, but just to keep it short, is that he was a white European, and here were these non-Europeans and non-whites who had a very vigorous, intelligent, lively, thriving spiritual culture. What he took away from it was that they lived so thrivingly and healthily because they had meaning in their life. And what they told him was, we are the sons of Father Son. That is the tribe that we are. And it is our job to make sure every day that the prayers and the, working for the good of the whole is what gets the sun across the sky. And so if we didn't do those things, then the sun would eventually stop being able to cross the sky. It's their purpose. And I see this too with the Anishinaabe, where I live, is that their purpose, they're born with a purpose, and that's to protect the water. I think we talked about the creation story, where the first human almost died, the animals saved him, and the promise was, I will protect you. The idea in conflict revolution is that we look in the mirror and have the courage to see those triggers of those people and how they relate back to who we are. I've just sent away to the publisher. I'm publishing another book. It's just called Conflict Revolution, World Peace, One Person at a Time. And it's pretty much it's a curriculum of sorts. So I've been steeped and having a few doubts like, well, are people going to want to look in the mirror? Well, yeah, they are. They're going to have to. That is my story and I'm sticking to it. And any conversation we want to have around that would be great. I would love, Heike, if you wouldn't mind to share some of those excursions into the darkness that you've taken.
Actually, my interest in this excursions into the darkness began because I'm not feeling very confident in the darkness. So I was always a little bit afraid of being alone in darkness. So I thought, yes, then I have to face my fears and go inside the darkness and meet the darkness alone. So I searched in the internet about darkness and came about a man in Germany who offered darkness therapy, and he wrote several books about that too. And there you go inside a room, and he provides that room with a little bathroom. Everything is completely dark, so no light is coming in. He taped the windows, and everything was completely dark. And once a day he comes inside the dark room and offers you a conversation about whatever you want to talk about, and the rest is you just sitting inside the dark. And I was fasting at the same time, so he provides some drinks and some tea or some fruit juice or something, or maybe some light soup or something. But mostly you are fasting inside the dark room. I did this the first time, many years ago, and that was actually the deepest experience. And I did it twice after that with a lady who offers these courses too. Yeah, I had different experiences in the darkness, because you can feel when you can feel the energies of the bright day. Even if it's dark, you feel it when it's daylight. You feel when it's light outside, and you can feel the darkness coming. And always when the night comes, you are haunted by your demons, what is Barbara is talking about, and you are really getting conscious about what is coming in the dark. I think it's not only your own things, it's also the things of the collective grabbing at you at night. And when you're sitting in the dark, you have no way out, so it's just so intense facing it. So you face your fears, you face your anger, you face your emotions, you face everything. So I had phases where an enormous anger came out against my family, about my sister, against society norms, and really like ugly masks, they came to me. And it was really, really strange how these aggressions and this anger came at night, and you have to face it, and you cannot step aside. And then in daylight you feel brighter and lighter and have other experiences. And what we talked about last time, Barbara, was an experience where my it was actually the last darkroom retreat I did, where my future self visited me in my apartment here. And and she talked to me about different things. she had experienced, and she warned me about things I want to do about uh, regeneration of limbs and regeneration of the human body. And she said, I do that already. I am long ahead in the future. I do that already. You have to be careful with this and that and that and that. And I was so surprised that she came to me in the darkroom retreat, and we were actually in my vision, we were sitting in my apartment here on the floor and discussing the several things she was telling me. So it's there are very, very different things happening in these darkroom retreats, and you meet your devils in a way, or your thoughts, or your fears, your angers, your everything. And at night it comes in a different phase, or in a different angle. You cannot escape it at all.
Well, I just kind of put it out there about like when Jung said the less that we bring this shadow dark part up into our conscious thinking, the more darker and obsessed it becomes. If we're just looking at getting out of the lens and looking at the whole operating system, somewhere there's some dark matter that's abscessing that influences what we create in the lens. The subconscious, which was always Freud's thing, the subconscious has an impact on the decisions you make in your conscious mind, even if you're not tuned into those things. So in regeneration, what part of bringing out that darkness and that abscess can influence the regeneration of those cells, or whatever we're looking to do? Reignite the cells to remember that embryonically they know how to grow? Yes. Joanne.
Hi, a good question. And I'd like to ask Heike what your future self was warning you about working with that in this lifetime.
She was warning me about keeping under the radar. If I really develop the skills to being able to grow out limbs, for example. She said, do it quietly, don't go to the public. The big pharma will not support you, will just stop the whole process. So just do it quietly and work on your skills. Just continue. She said, just do what you do. You can do it. I do it. My future self said, I do it. And but be careful that you keep under the radar.
So in other words, it's not safe yet. Was it from a place of not being safe, or just not being accepted?
I think it could be accepted, but there are, like with all kind of plant medicine and alternative medicines and anti-cancer medicines or whatever, it is accepted from the people taking it, but it's not wished by the people with the big money and standing behind the medical system as it exists per today.
Okay, thanks.
What you meet in these darkness retreats is really when you go through all these emotions during a time of 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It's really a kind of a healing. You feel very regenerated after these 2 weeks on very different levels, and you are very sensitive. You're regarding your own emotions, regarding other emotions, and you feel just very, very different. And there is a healing going on a different plane than the normal day-to-day life. So and And that is where it's meeting what Barbara was saying. If you drain this emotional abscess and let it come out, then it's really a different thing. You cannot keep that inside and heal at the same time. That would never be possible, I think.
Well, and partly because in just the scientific map that we have that creates matter, everything within you has an effect upon what gets projected into that lens, which is part of the great value of the repetitive feeling and breathing as a physical release of emotion, as opposed to analyzing why we felt that way. And surely not just in the dark therapy that you've done, but when emotion comes up, it triggers thought patterns. So those are the things that are connected, like welded together. Things come up about my family. So I have an intellectual story about my family, but separately, if we can just isolate ourselves into having this deep relationship with emotion that doesn't get connected to intellectualizing. When I get mad at somebody, if only for that, I think they covered it in the last channeling about harvesting your emotions. Use those triggers to harvest those. So I really do see our work as something that's almost like a dark therapy while you're walking around, like the focus of letting those emotions flow. Lynda.
I wanted to ask Heike, I think I picked up that you said that this was like a 2-week therapy session. Is that how long you're in this room? For 2 weeks?
You can choose what time you want to do it. So you can, the first teacher I was to, he did these retreats for 49 days, one time in Nepal and one time in India and one time at a different place. And he had shamans as teachers, and got several exercises to do in the darkness retreat. In his book, he describes that it is originally used at shamanic initiation because you really meet your deepest fears and your deepest, darkest demons, and you can face them. And when you come out after 49 days, you will be a different person. But he offered these retreats for 1 week or for 2 weeks or for 3 weeks. And I chose to do it for 2 weeks. But if I would have known it the first time, I would have chosen it longer, because it became really very intense and very deep after 2 weeks. And then I had to finish. So it was very interesting. But you are in the dark room for this time, and you have a conversation for maybe 1 hour if you want to, but the rest of the time you are alone with your experience and with yourself. But you have a possibility to go outside. So if you want to stop it, so you just leave it. You can give them a sign, they are not far away, and you can say, I want to quit or something. You are not forced to be inside like in a jail or something. Everything is by choice, and you do it day by day and have these experiences, and it's mostly about yourself. It's not about anybody else.
Is it somewhat like doing past life regression? I did some of that where I relived things that were causing me to have nightmares or recurring dreams that were always the same over a long period of years. So I did what was called past life regression. 3 of those past lives came up. I realized after I finished those that those recurring dreams no longer ever came up again. I never had them again, and they were kind of scary. So,
which reinforces the idea that the emotion and the intellect that we're carrying around in us may not just be us. It may not be a pain that's related to something that happened in this physical life in that sense. So it serves the same purpose of extinguishing the abscess.
And I think some of the emotions are just collective emotions. So we are picking up a lot of collective stuff too, which is not our own at all. Of course, some is connected to your past lives and some is connected to your now life, and some is connected to the collective at all. So I think it doesn't really matter actually, because it's all your emotions anyway. So if your neighbor is mad at you, it's the same as if you are mad as at your neighbor. It's not much difference.
It also reinforces to me the idea that when we're separating out these two things of intellect and emotion, emotion is the creative fuel. So if we can harvest a past life emotion and integrate it and release it, we can harvest the collective, we can harvest our own. It's the thoughts that need to transform themselves, and this kind of goes back to undoing our own brainwashing.
I did box work 30 years ago, and that was something where padded room with a facilitator, and in that, the facilitator held you, cuddled you in a, like, like you were an infant again, and emotions rose up and flowed, and you could cry, scream, laugh, whatever. I hadn't thought about that in quite a few years.
I think I went through a similar thing. I think it was primal screaming or something.
Yeah.
Got
What
us to.
Amazing. Thank you, Heike.
I would love to jump into a channel, see what Jung has to say. So let's begin and take some deep breaths. Deep, deep into your solar plexus, and exhale. And release the blocks as you exhale. As you inhale the light. Bring the light into the darkness. And as you exhale all of the debris, the unneeded thoughts, the trapped emotion, and listen as you do that for the silence within. Touch upon that non-physical part of yourself. Imagine us as we are around the country, around the world, connected in the center of the earth. We're like the leaves of a lotus, each of us, one being, interwoven and yet separate. So we will command that only the most divine light shine down upon you at this time, and the greatest good be present here. It is always such a pleasure to welcome you to the circle today, and to be welcomed, and to be able to speak freely with you, to reveal ourselves. This incredible experiment that has stretched through the decades is coming into a new fruition. As you have worked on your own selves with every fiber of your being throughout this life, so we too have been working from Afterlife to be a part of this great change that is happening right now. When we started speaking through Barbara and speaking to you in this way, it was not the case. It was a much different world of consciousness. And those of you who were called, who volunteered and were chosen to bring this mission forward have come through all of these years, and you have now seen the power that you have. 25 years ago, you did not fully see the power that you have. Our new mission, it's not actually a new mission, but our focus in this new time of greater awareness and consciousness is to help you take this next step. Where do you go when you're healed? What do you do when you're healed? Because so much of the time that you spent having these abscesses, and don't get us wrong, you still have abscesses, but not in the fashion that you did all those many years ago when you first started. You were driven unconsciously by them. And it felt as if the world was out of control and that people were devious sometimes and you couldn't trust them. And you created a lot of drama that you expended a lot of energy working through. And oftentimes living in that kind of consciousness, you deal with perpetual illnesses or conflicts within relationships, unfulfilled dreams. So jump ahead to where you are now. It's not that the journey is over by any means, but you have come so far that you've reached a new level of learning and understanding everything that you've embodied thus far. And we can say this is true of everyone who is listening to our voice, that you've come to a place where on some greater level, you understand that you have this power. And you also understand that you have the choice to pick up that power and use that power, or you have the choice to continue to think in limited and deceptive modes, to suppress emotion, to ignore intuition. You all know it's your choice. Now you all have proven to yourselves and to us, although you weren't out to prove to us, but proven to yourselves that you are these people. You are children of abundance. Your inheritance is to be taken care of and sustained as you take care and sustain the world around you and yourself. And how to overcome those blocks to a fuller, deeper, richer mastery of your power is what we're here to help you do. And to that end, it is correct that in all of these years and all of the work that we have done with you, for you, to you, around you, that young has always been a part. The complete picture that Freud and Jung in Afterlife came together to create has been absolutely essential to the processes that we've been asking you to experiment with, to the maps that we have given you. Both of their perspectives are part of the unified field and create the wholeness together of the creation of human life. That added to the scientific pieces, the parts about the four fundamental forces, sort of the deeper earth sciences of which you are a part, has built this model. And every day through all of these years, whether you were knowing it or not, you have been helping us to collect and research data and information that help us steer our course to help you. While in physical life, those of us who have been in the initial party, and before that, we were amongst the angels, but we had physical lives that we learned from as well. We don't have a current life in a physical body to talk about this being a past life, but all the things that we learned while we were in human form took on a much different meaning when we got into afterlife. And we've been trying to convey this to you. We said last week that when you get into afterlife, you have a lot of regrets, but we didn't expound upon the idea that these regrets are that you didn't pick up your power, that you underestimated yourself, that you listened too much to the voices of culture and didn't go into the dark room and tap into the deepest, darkest part of your power, yourself within you, your source. It's a part of your identity. Compassion is the fifth fundamental force. It's everywhere. It's in all space. It's in all time. It's in all life. It's in all perception. It's everything. It's the root of everything. It is God that's infusing your physical form with spirit and life and math and personality and destiny and fate, free will, all of those things. This incredible miracle. Those are the things that you regret in afterlife. But you quickly come to see that those things exist still within you. They exist within you, whether you know it or not, whether you doubt yourself, you still own that piece of God, of compassion. And it creates everything. So whether you're talking about healing a mental illness or a psychological illness, a spiritual illness of self-doubt and not picking up your power, or you're actually talking about healing a physical illness, or if you're talking about being able to facilitate the regeneration, this all comes out of the darkness. Because at the root of the entire operating system is a mystery. It's a void. It's dark matter. Out of darkness, everything that is miraculous arises. So when you're talking about regeneration of limbs or spinal columns or anything else, liver, transformation of scar cells into healed tissue, all of that originates in the darkness as well. And the period of time you're moving into is finding first in yourself the will and the courage to go into that darkness. And that's one reason we've given you a roadmap. So you're not just flailing around thinking the devil is overtaking you. Also, to attract to you people who innately are also being drawn to go into the darkness, but may not know that's what it means. So people still caught up deeply in the voices of culture in their head, in trying to strive and work hard to live up to what the voices of culture around them think them and tell them to be. There's a lot of confusing emotional, intellectual information right now as the world is forced, one person at a time, to look at who you truly are. One reason why the darkness retreat helps with that is because there is no external culture to fool you. When you're walking around on the street and you get triggered by something and you think it's because that person did this or that, and you're looking at that person, you're creating physical form around that emotion. But when you're away from it in the dark with just your energy and your body with no light, something happens molecularly to you. And there's a power, a great, great power to do work in there. So if you were ever trying to heal from a cancer or recover from some liver disease or any of that, this kind of work is so beneficial because you have goal, you have a vision that's necessary. It's not just a nice meditation to do on a Sunday afternoon. It's that you're facing a physical loss, which could be physical loss of physical life. And so there's some drive there. And that's a lot of the challenge of physical illnesses, is to tick that switch for drive to explore, to drive to have to explore, get in there. And of course, all of the challenges that you go through help to build this unity within you. It's part of the necessary part of it. You wouldn't want to just be sitting on a mountaintop all day, all night for a life, not having anything that challenges you. No. In that darkness, you're going to find your power. And when we adjust this to the everyday life, the practical life, the same is true of just walking around in a day, is that if you're committed to this transformation of yourself and then your commitment to transforming the entire human species, you have given yourself that meaning. And it's not empty, hollow definition of something that isn't true. It's very much true that as you heal yourself, you help to heal the world. You heal your whole entire world when you heal yourself. And you're a part of the whole entire world. Having that meaning in your life to make a difference, to make a difference to your life. That's like a decision where you're not just going to float around and be a victim to everybody around you. You're going to know that life is difficult, and you're fortifying yourself to be as strong and self-aware as you possibly can in a day, one day at a time. World peace, one day at a time. Make each day that commitment. And then throughout the day, you give yourself an opportunity to process emotion differently. And therefore, you don't abscess. This is the whole idea, not just of emptying out the abscess, but of not perpetuating it. And to whatever degree you can, whether it's harvesting your emotions when you're out in public and you're mad at someone and you stop to feel and breathe and remind yourself that you want to be a peacemaker, you want to own your emotion, you don't want abscess, you don't want projection, and you want to build the person that you want to be, not responding to the people that trigger you in a way that perpetuates a conflict, but to change from within, own all that depth, own that anger, own that rage, own that frustration. And in the meantime, by doing that, you're also going to naturally help your intellect. Your intellect and your ego are going to be put in their place. Ego as an essential part of the entire operating system that's defining and identifying as the human that you are programmed to be, right there in the chair, all of you. Not overpowering, not attaching to emotion. When you detach the emotion from an intellectual message, you have indifference. And think of all the things that you're not triggered by, that you're indifferent to. So this entire system that you all have helped us create is really proving through you that it works. And that brings us so much excitement, because then we can help facilitate the synchronicity that is needed to move this into a bigger format, to influence the world in an even deeper way. And that's always our mission. We have very high hopes to be able to save the world through you. And this is such a great honor. Always, it's a great honor to be in the circle with those of you who are working so hard right now to have that meaning in your life, and to be the change, and to be the inspiration. And you must always know that you have no idea who you impact, who you inspire when you live this way. You just never know. And more than anything, you inspire the energy to continue to go in that unified field, in that direction of unification, and that birth of the new humans that aren't going to destroy, that aren't going to abscess, and that are going to create the sustainability that is needed on the planet today. So do not doubt all of the difficult times you've been through have aided in this particular step in evolution. And we are grateful. So with all of that said, we will open for any questions and conversations you would like to have.
This is Debbie. I'm especially for self-regeneration and transformation, for the world to see the darkness and be regenerated. Once we're aware of our power and who we really are, is this what's called enlightenment? Are we in a higher vibration, first of all? Not being in the victim mode or a fear mode, but as opposed to owning our emotions and detaching from them and listening to intuition. Is that a higher vibration, and what is referred to that as that, and to enlightenment, which results in no longer being in the reincarnation cycle?
Well, yes, it is a state of being enlightened. The higher vibration is that when light has to try to shine its way through sludge, it bends and has to go around the darkness because it can't permeate it. So when you clear away that sludge, think of it as you're going across the city and there's a big, long detour. And it takes you an hour to go what normally might have taken you 10 minutes. And then when that opens up, you go much faster through there in time. You're getting through it faster. So that's sort of a simplistic description of what happens. What's interesting about getting to a place where you no longer reincarnate, right now, there's few phenomenons of souls who choose not to reincarnate. Part of that is because, like Adamus, like Saint Germain, they've learned how to have a physical life experience without having to come through the birth canal and be cemented into the perception of one life at a time. That is another thing that emptying out the darkness helps facilitate, because if you're in your body and you have this sludge, you have this abscess, it keeps you attached to your body as well. It shows up in your body, it keeps you attached to your body. So ridding yourself of that backlog of emotion and the stories that go with that trauma frees up your energy to not have to be in that body. And we talked a bit about this a few weeks ago about the indigenous cultures that have been shapeshifters, the Toltec, who understood how to undo the brainwashing of being in the physical world and releasing themselves from having to be associated with those bodies. So, and then there are some who go on to not maybe reincarnate, but become a tree, because that's a whole nother set of experiences and consciousness. But yes, this is enlightenment.
Thank you so much. That was brilliant. Thank you. I'm really inspired now to clear the sludge. Thank you.
Hi, Jojo here. I have a quick question. Wondering if you can shed any light on the unexpected death on August 31st of Helmut Pilar, who was the premier person on Earth carrying on Dr. Hammer's work of German healing knowledge.
It was time. Is there any particular angle of enlightenment you want about his death?
Oh, well, we're all still in shock about it because it was so unexpected. We were just working with him last week on a class, and he was talking about forming a program to educate teachers to be able to teach German medicine, German healing knowledge to others. So it seemed like he was actively alive and working and carrying on the cause. And then I don't know how he died. We haven't been told that yet, other than it wasn't an accident. So I understand what you're saying. People die when it's time for them to die. Yeah, what it means in the bigger picture, I guess, for the German healing knowledge group.
Part of his life was that he had meaning. He didn't stop. He didn't think, well, I shouldn't do this because I'm going to die soon. But on a bigger level, that meaning gave him energy and purpose and function, and he presented his vision, and it was time to go. And the others who are left behind are now here to take up that vision and see how they will find that same meaning in their lives.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Heike here. I would like to ask a question. How can we come out of this collective hypnotization and the collective expectations much faster? And how can we shed this programming we are conditioned with and we have undergone? How can we shed it and get rid of it much faster than we already do?
In reference to individuals, if you're speaking about an individual, yourself, or someone else saying, I want to shed this programming and I want to shed it quickly, first of all, remember that faster is not always better. On the other hand, there are things that any human can do to facilitate not lagging along, allowing yourself to accept the comforts of the brainwashing. There's a certain amount of numbing that goes on in brainwashing. Humans, especially breaking out of the old humanity that looks to brainwashing, looks to the voices of culture, looks to someone else to take care of them. Your best bet, you and anyone else, is to focus with such a high level of intended mastery on your own life that you become like an Olympian. Olympians don't sleep in and do crossword puzzles. They're up at the crack of dawn. So that is the facilitation that we mean. It can happen fast if you put your will to it. And then as you put your will to it and do it for yourself, you spread it much, much more purely, let's say, than trying to think that you have to change the whole society quickly. All you can change in that sense is yourself. And that's always been our question. What is it that inspires you to pick up your power? If you want to get to a more rapid transformation, learn that what gets you out of bed at the crack of dawn to go be an Olympian, as opposed to lying around doing crossword puzzles and overeating. Those are the self-realizations that can have a huge impact. And then what is it that makes some people use their free will and others still want to be victimized? Don't waste your time trying to figure it out. Just take care and focus on yourself.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
This is Lynn. Can you speak to the awe and the joy and the feel good that is also a part of our free will, and how to make that the overarching experience while navigating these other dark emotions, issues, and times?
The joy and the bliss and the awesome sense of being come from self-love. When you're in self-love, you're not denying that life is difficult. You're not denying that people can hurt you. You're not denying that you yourself can victimize yourself. But when you're in self-love and you've opened up your emotion to flow through you, and you're listening and learning for your intuition, and you're getting control of those thought processes, you're taking care of yourself in a way that you were never taught to do. And so just the fact that you're striving to even do it brings you this sense of awe. And the more that you peel away all of those erroneous stories about how little power you have and how much you can't do and all of that, and the world opens up, then you begin to be able to look at any of the struggles as gifts. Yes, you feel emotion around them. Yes, you have to have dramas. Not as many as you used to, but life is filled with dramas and you have to be a part of it, but you do it from a place of love. And that's where it comes from inside you. Totally triggered by your self-love of yourself, not triggered by something you achieve, not triggered by somewhere that you're living or somebody that you're living with. Triggered by the fact that you finally appreciate your human life, this incredibly miraculous body and whole operating system, and you're ready then to take on the world.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Barbara Daughter, and I had a question about, I love that about self-love. That is definitely a focus of mine, and I have a question about listening into that intuition that seems to me below an auditory level for me. I would like to strengthen my awareness of my intuition, so that's my question. How can I do that?
Yes. Well, there are several things we can tell you. One is that the more that you allow yourself to feel and breathe and detach from intellect, the more emotion you bring, the more intuition you bring. And in going back to the id, or the animals who have emotion and intuition together as an instinct, it's originally meant to be below the thinking radar. It's instinct that has you running from the polar bear who's chasing you. You don't stop and go, well, should I run? Your body just reacts. And that's kind of what, in an ideal world, you're kind of getting back to. But the challenge is that big intellect. Part of what the intellect does to get in the way is that it defines your intuition as something that maybe isn't quite correct. And I don't mean just a definition. I mean, when you're in the world and you're having to make a decision in the moment to analyze, well, what is the intuitive message and how is it going to work out? And if it doesn't work out like you think it's going to work out, was it really intuition? So there's all kinds of intellectualizing around that instinctual action. How you can help strengthen your personal global understanding of how intuition works in your own body, in your own life, is that it's not always going to point you to where you think you want to go. It's not always going to point you to a comfortable, awesome place, because that's not what intuition does. It's there to point you to the places you need to go to learn what you need to learn. And it's sort of back to Joanne's friends who passed away, where it was time in a much bigger sense than anybody in the humans around the incident can see. But from a non-physical place, all of you are together in the circle of souls. And if you could all communicate together, you would understand the need not to have him there, but that's not how human minds work. But that's what's going on in the intuitive process. This is for the good of the whole, is a much bigger picture. And it also might be something that doesn't show up for another 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Oh, why did I leave that relationship? You've had those moments in your far past where you wondered, and now in the long run, you clearly see why you had to leave that relationship. So part of this is your experimental adjusting as you're going through life. You're the experiment, so you're seeing how much can you trust that instinct? How much can you get out of your head and just allow that to be your driving force, even if it's probably better without a lot of intellectualizing, frankly.
Thank you.
We're going to close the channel at this time and reluctantly leave you. And yet, the funny thing about that is that when the channel stops, we're still here. We are still here with you. You are there, focused on your physical body and projecting out the entire universe into your lens, having it bounce back and revolve back so you can perceive it in this body. But we're here in that dark matter, in that unconscious part of you. We are so honored, again, to be able to have these conversations, which are historic, and we enjoy. So just continue to watch and be amazed. Namaste.